Today I'm out in the shop replacing the spark plugs or cleaning and reusing the old spark plugs. Both procedures are quite easy. On my SLT 1554 Cub Cadet lawn tractor with a CV740 Kohler command engine. But this applies to most Cub Cadets and any tractor with a Kohler engine, whether it be a 2-cylinder like mine or a single cylinder. At Stiles Automotive, I do automotive work, modifications, and tips. If you find this video helpful, consider subscribing and watching the other videos. Some tools and consumables you're going to need to do this job is a 3/8 ratchet. For automotive work, I normally use 1/2-inch drive tools, but for spark plugs, I like to use 3/8 so that you're not over torquing the spark plugs. A spark plug socket, I like to use a dedicated spark plug socket that has the rubber insert inside it. It helps hold the plug, helps keep the spark plug socket aligned with the spark plug without damaging it. And then also an extension, a feeler gauge or dedicated spark plug gap tool. I'm just showing a feeler gauge here, but I'm going to show you some other gap tools in just a minute as we get into the video. And of course you're going to need new spark plugs. This is the RC12YC, which is recommended by both Cub Cadet and Kohler. Most Cub Cadets use this spark plug with this heat range, and most Kohler engines use this spark plug. So it's a very common spark plug. Use a good nickel anti-seize on the threads. Don't use anything besides nickel. Nickel is the highest temperature anti-seize, and it's the best to use on spark plugs. If you're going to clean up your spark plugs, a little 200 grit or finer sandpaper will clean up the electrode. To clean up your used spark plugs, carburetor cleaner will take that carbon off. To remove the spark plug, I'm going to pull on the boot, not on the ignition wire, and just push it to the side. I'm going to use my 5/8 spark plug socket, push it on to the spark plug, make sure it's fully seated, and remove the spark plug. It has fine threads, so it should come out easily. And if I'm going to clean up the old one, I'll show you that procedure. If I'm going to replace it with a new one, I just simply have to put anti-seize on it and insert it. Notice the dark soot on this spark plug. That's telling me that combustion isn't great. It should be a light brown color. This one's running extremely rich. That indicates possible carburetor problem. Bring my spark plug over to the trash can, and using safety glasses and protective gloves, I'm going to spray the inside of the spark plug, attempting to clean it. If it's all corroded up and dirty down inside, you might as well just replace it rather than clean it. But if it's part of your annual maintenance, if you just want to pull these out and clean them, you can certainly do that. And then I'm going to take several times of cleaning this with carburetor cleaner, letting it soak. Using a plastic bristled brush. Going to give it a little bit of help, mechanical help, over just the carburetor cleaner. You can see how it's starting to come a little bit cleaner already. I'm going to take my just a piece of my sandpaper, fold it over so it puts pressure on. And I'm not trying to make my gap wider, I'm just trying to clean up the leads, both the little electrode and the grounding strap, the little lead. And once I've cleaned up to my satisfaction, I can go back with my feeler gauge, my 30 thousandths feeler gauge, and re-gap this spark plug. That's still in pretty good shape. Should feel tension on it. Should just be able to slide in there and feel tension. So I've hit the spark plug one last time to make sure I knock all the debris out of it after hitting it with a brush. Now instead of going through all that work, you could just replace it with new. But either way, you want to hit it with a good nickel anti-seize, and you don't want to get it down on the electrode. You just want to coat the threads with the anti-seize. Nice, smooth, even coat all over the threads. Help the spark plug threads live longer. Now if I were going to install a new spark plug, I'd still check that gap. And notice how beat up these two boxes are from these two new spark plugs. This spark plug could easily be damaged in shipment if it's dropped with no protection, like these have no protection on them. The nicer Bosch plugs and premium plugs usually have some kind of a protective sleeve on them here, and you don't have to worry about the electrode as much, but you still want to check the gap. This 30 thousandths feeler gauge, or 0.76 millimeter, is the gap, should just slip in tightly. So this new plug has a good 30 thousandths gap to it already. So before installing that, I would just coat the threads with anti-seize, just like I did with the old plug that I'm reinstalling. Let's go over to the bench and talk about adjusting spark plug gaps and spark plug gap tools. Now the filler gauge is my favorite, and it's definitely the most accurate, but it doesn't work in all circumstances, and it's nice for measuring other things, so that's why it's a handy tool to have around. It's not just for spark plugs. Now the second most accurate, I feel is most accurate, is a tool like this Stiles tool. However, the drawback of this style of tool is it doesn't include all gaps. If you have some weird measurement of a gap, it may not be included on this tool. And there's two tools like this. This is the small gap. There's also a larger electronic or large gap tool that has the adjusting tools on it, like this one. But another one of my favorites is this tool from Right Tools, and it has the little wire gauges on it so that you can stick it into a spark plug. Now, a filler gauge won't work on this particular plug, but a tool like this will. This is a spark plug out of my Ford F-150 with the 5.4 liter. Now I've had this tool for years, and I keep it clean by keeping it in the bag, but I've never noticed this warning before. If you work for Right Tools, let me know in the comments what the heck this means. Why would this particular tool have that type of warning on it? To adjust the spark plug gap, these tools are handy. You can use the filler gauge and just use a pair of pliers to adjust this, but it's much handier to use this gap tool. And you insert the tool onto the electrode, the ground strap of the electrode, and if I push down and to the left, I'm going to open up the gap, and if I push up or to the right in the video, I'm going to close the gap, and I can adjust the gap between the electrode and the strap. And just to mention one more thing, there's also another tool that's like a coin. Those are horrible. Those are very inaccurate. They've got kind of a tapered edge on them that you stick the edge into the gap and try to measure. I've seen those for years in the auto parts store. They're all over the auto parts store counter, and they're cheap, and I would never recommend one of those. This tool is about $5. Filler gauge, $10 to $20 for a good one. This tool is $15 or less. I'm going to line my spark plug up with the hole, and I'm going to back thread to make sure I'm seated on those threads. I don't want to cross thread my spark plug into those threads at all. So I can feel it when it's flat, and I can feel it when it starts to engage. So with new anti-seize on that plug, it should go really, really easy. And once I've got that all the way seated by hand, I'm going to torque it. I don't normally torque spark plugs, even in cars, unless it's something that's really critical, an aluminum head that I know that only has a few threads. And this spark plug has quite a few threads in this head, so I'm not going to torque it. But if you're going to torque yours, the spec is 20 foot-pounds or 27 Newton meters. So I'm using a 3/8 ratchet. Normally I use 1/2-inch drive stuff, but when I work with spark plugs, even in automotive, I use 3/8 stuff because you don't want to over torque it. 20 foot-pounds is not a lot of torque. I still have one more cylinder to do on the other side. This is a V-twin Kohler engine. But that concludes the video. If you found it useful, let me know in the comments, and please subscribe. I look forward to your comments.